why fund managers can't beat the S&P 500? Because they're sheep, and sheep get slaughtered.
The numbers told the story, they always do.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Because all we care about is getting fucking rich. You connect points I don't even know to look for.
The most valuable commodity I know of is information. Public's out there throwing darts at a board, sport. I don't throw darts at a board. I bet on sure things.
Welcome, Karma Clan, to the Sports Trading Desk podcast. We're previewing divisions. We're moving on to the NFC North. So let's dive right into it. I don't really know where to start. We typically start from the bottom or we start from the top. But this division is just so muddled that really anybody can win it. So let's start with my hometown favorite. In fact, I think we have two hometown favorites actually across the board here. You're a Vikings fan, right, Corey?
You got that right.
So I'm from Chicago. I'm a big Bears fan, even though I've pretty much hated them and have been self-loathing for the last few years. So let's start with Chicago. So Corey, what's the prices on Chicago?
Chicago, their over/under for the year are 7.5 wins. You can buy them for the divisional odds at plus 540, NFC odds of 38-1, and Super Bowl odds of 75-1.
What do you think, Zach?
Oh, not a chance in hell. This team, I'm terrified of this team's ceiling because I think it's lower than it's been even than last year. Their front office is awful. You can see it in their draft picks. You can see it in their signings. Jimmy Graham is somehow the talk of training camp. He hasn't been the talk of training camp in 7 years. So, David Montgomery, we found out today, has a potential long-term injury. I don't think they know yet. But they don't have any backup running backs. So they just seem ill-equipped and ill-prepared to really start the season in 2 weeks. And that's my biggest concern. Now, I don't think Nagy's really the biggest problem. I think he's been hampered. And I think because this is his first head coaching job, he probably has been a little more passive than he probably should have been in the development of his team as a whole. Kind of like, I don't want to step on the boss's toes type thing. So, this year I feel like it's going to be kind of a sink or swim. And if they sink, you could see a lot of, turnover in leadership, so to speak.
Yeah, so it seems like almost everybody's down on the Bears. So being down on the Bears is certainly, there's no edge to be had there. That's definitely not an off-market opinion. So what do you think, Corey?
I think the Bears really lack identity this year. Years past, it's been their defense they've kind of always been able to base their kind of power off of, but they only return 62% of their defensive snaps from last year, and that defense is just getting older. They got Hicks, who 31, Robertson Harris, 27, Quinn, 30, Trevathan's 30, and I just don't think that defense is what it has been, even last year maybe. I think it's maybe even taken another step back. And then on offense, you just haven't heard anything good coming out of training camp there. You got Trubisky and Foles kind of fighting for the quarterback job, and it's just a lot of confusion, I think. I don't think they really have a strong identity at this point.
Yeah, so the Bears defense got a lot of flack about regression last year, and they certainly didn't turn the ball over as much as they did in 2008 when they were the most elite defense in the league, but they actually only gave up one more point on average last year than they did in 2018. So, they weren't a total disaster. It was more so, again, the ineptitude of the offense. And of course, that kind of has always started with Mitch Trubisky. And in camp, you still don't know who's going to be the starter. So we saw a few news items today that seem to indicate Foles kind of has the leg up, but that can change day to day. So I don't necessarily know if either one of these quarterbacks gives the team a better chance of winning games to begin with. I have no idea why they traded for Foles when there were so many other options that would have cost a lot less. And I think some people forget too that Foles, did come back last season and then actually lost his job on merit to Gardner Minshew. So just not a lot of optimism here. So is there anything optimistic can you find any optimism here with this team? I mean, the wide receivers, Allen Robinson has always been stellar. Their offensive line is average at best. I think the strong suit here is obviously the defense, but even that is questionable. I mean, anything positive to say, guys?
I got something. It's going to be followed up by a negative. But the positive is Khalil Mack admits he was a little sloppy last year, and I think a little bit was from his big contract, had a stellar, opening year with the Bears. But so he's jacked and ready, and he threw the quarterbacks under the bus. And when he was speaking about how ready he is for this season and that it doesn't matter who the quarterback is, which is basically an indictment against both quarterbacks. And the biggest indictment against these two QBs is neither of them can beat each other to get the starting job. Mm-hmm. So think about it from the standpoint of, you can't beat Mitch Trubisky to get the starting job on an NFL team. You can't beat Nick Foles to get the starting job on an NFL team. So how bad are these guys? If you think about it from the standpoint of they can't even beat each other convincingly.
Yeah, and I wonder what the sentiment is like in the locker room as well. But again, on defense, you got Pro Bowler up front, Nakeem Hicks, Pro Bowler Khalil Mack, Pro Bowler in the secondary, Eddie Jackson. You still got Kyle Fuller, Danny Trevathan, and Robert Quinn. There is talent there. And Chuck Pagano is definitely a good defensive coordinator. And I still am a believer in Nagy. Like, I don't think that last year's pullback was necessarily all his fault. I think he's doing the best with what he has. Corey, remind me, what's the win total for the Bears?
7.5. It
does seem kind of high.
Yeah, I think it's actually dropped down. I want to say it opened at 8.
Mm-hmm. Again, it doesn't make me feel sharp to say that the Bears are going to go under, but that's the way I'm going to lean.
Yeah, to your point, Brett, on the Bears defense last year, that they didn't actually let up too many more points than they did the previous year. They actually faced the hardest schedule of opposing offenses in 2019. So I think maybe the perception that a lot of people have on the Bears defense, maybe not being as strong, could be not as valid as we may think. And going into this year, they actually have the 4th easiest schedule in the NFL. So they have that going for them if their roster isn't on the positive.
So which way do you lean, Zach?
Well, if they have Nick Foles, I give them a fighter's chance to maybe vie for the division. But I would want a healthy Nick Foles for the full season. If they're going to play the Nick Foles had a bad game, bring Trubisky in, I don't think this team's going to go anywhere. They're just going to crap out. So
I mean, there's the upside, actually.
Believer.
If Foles plays the whole season and he can play at elite Foles version of himself and can kind of extract the most from Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller, and Jimmy Graham has a resurgence and the offensive line plays average. I mean, remember, this division's not great. I don't think it's not out of line to say that they could win the division if things break right, but which way you lean?
I think the division's up for.
think the 7.5 is pretty right. I might lean slightly to the over, but it's just the smallest of leans. This is a team I think is going to finish somewhere between the 6 to 9 wins. So that 7.5 seems at a perfect spot, but maybe a slight lean to the over.
All right, so let's move on to the Minnesota Vikings. What's the price on the Vikings, Corey? Your hometown favorite.
So their over under wins on the year is 9. Divisional odds, they're the favorite in the division at plus 146. NFC odds of 12 to 1 and Super Bowl odds of 26 to 1.
Let's start with you, Zach. What do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think we all know that Stefan Diggs going to the Bills leaves kind of a gap in their offense with an aging Thielen as their number one pass catcher. They have a fresh rookie that could be decent, but it's probably going to take him some time to get acclimated and fill some big shoes. Their running game is obviously going to be the key to this team's success, and with Gary Kubiak as the offensive coordinator, I think you'll see similar results offensively that you had last year. The problem really is the question of, will Minnesota's defense be up to speed or not? They're going to be missing 4 starters from last year. So those are some holes that they're going to need to be filled. And they may be able to do it, but same thing with the Bears. Some of their better players they're getting up there. Anthony Barr has been around a while. Harrison Smith. So it's like the Bears. This team probably peaked 2 to 3 years ago. Got Kirk Cousins, kind of been on the downturn ever since. So it's hard to see them getting much more than 7 to 9 wins.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Kirk Cousins had a good year last year, even in spite of some of the injuries at wide receiver. But yeah, this year, so you lose to Stefanski. You have Dalvin Cook, who is injury prone. I like Madison. He's a good backup, and even Boone played well in spots. But I think Thielen is on the downside of his career. I think, replacing Diggs with a rookie, Justin Jefferson, and expecting him to be as productive and fill kind of the same role as Diggs in year one is overly optimistic at best. And then, of course, on the defense, losing Everson Griffin, Mackenzie Alexander, Lindell Joseph, Xavier Rhodes, Trey Waynes. There's a lot of turnover here. And then, of course, they try to fill the middle of the defensive line with Michael Pierce from the Ravens, and then he opts out for COVID reasons. So they're kind of left empty-handed. They got still Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr at linebacker, but I think they're kind of both overrated. I think Zimmer as a defensive mastermind is also overrated. The Vikings are one of those teams that really capitalize on the energy and momentum of playing with the home field advantage, which is obviously going to be mitigated this year, if not completely eliminated, if we have 0 fans the entire year. So I'm going to have to lean under 9. Kind of given kind of that predicament. What do you think, Corey?
Yeah, I'm really down on the Vikings this year. I kind of look at 2 things. I think their pass rush is going to be extremely weak, losing Griffin and then just kind of struggling to really replace that. They're really just looking at Danielle Hunter, and he's a really solid pass rusher, but outside of him, they don't really have anyone. And behind that, then their corner play. They lost, as we mentioned, Rhodes, Waynes, and Alexander. Now, none of the 3 of them really had great years last year. Rhodes definitely didn't have the year he had in 2018. Mm-hmm. But losing those 3 guys, they really are replacing them with some rookies and some guys that are very unproven. I like their safety play and linebacking group, but to go back to that defensive line and the cornerback group, that's kind of the 2 parts of your defense that really stops the passing. And I think looking at the Vikings schedule this year, that's going to really not play to their favor. They're going to be facing Rodgers twice, Stafford twice, Deshaun Watson. Russell Wilson, Matt Ryan, Dak Prescott, Tom Brady, and Drew Brees. So, I mean, those are some of the top passers in the league. So I think they're really going to struggle in that way. And to your point about Zimmer, I think he needs to kind of release some reins he has on the OC this year. Kind of in the past, they've kind of tried to force the run a little bit too much. As we mentioned, Kirk Cousins had a career year last year, and the Vikings still threw the ball second least in the league. So I think some of the lack of aggression comes from Zimmer and just his defensive mind, run the ball, play good defense. And I think some of that needs to kind of be pulled back if the Vikings are going to reach a ceiling. But I kind of look at this team and I don't think they really improved really anywhere from last year. And I definitely would lean to the under as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I really don't see that they improved anywhere. And I don't think, I wasn't high on them last year. I feel like they overachieved. And if Justin Jefferson does not play the role that the Vikings expect him to, the team really loses that player to take the top off the secondary and to really expand the defense. And if they can't expand the defense, then obviously it's going to compress. And if the defense compresses, I think Dalvin Cook's going to have a lot harder time finding openings. And I feel like Dalvin Cook is their most potent offensive weapon. And so if you really lose his edge, then I think you put even more pressure on Kirk Cousins. And we all know, I think, Kirk Cousins cannot handle the pressure. I think it's a strong lean under.
And I've actually heard that Justin Jefferson probably won't be starting the year, and BC Johnson may actually get the initial wide receiver 2 snaps. So I don't know if it's necessarily a positive for BC Johnson. I think it's more of a Justin Jefferson taking some time to just the learning curve of the NFL. But
yeah, so which way you lean, Zach, on the over/under? 9.
Oh, definitely under. I mean, that number I feel like should be exactly where the Bears are, about 7.5, probably 8 more so. But yeah, the 9's definitely too high.
Yeah. Okay, great. So moving on to the Lions. Let's do the Lions. The team that has been getting a lot of love from some of the sharper bettors. This is a team that we've kind of been talking about a little bit on the side, Zach and Corey. We kind of all liked them. And I thought we were dramatically off market on the Lions. I thought we were being really sharp about thinking that they could overachieve, spotting some really great performances last year that kind of had flown under the radar. I was talking to Zach a couple of days ago, talking about how when they went into the Chiefs in week 4, the Chiefs were 3-0. The Lions were 2-0-1 and really should have been 3-0. Playing in Detroit, there was a lot of, it was a crazy ball game, but take out a few fluke plays, and the Lions really probably should have won that game by double digits. So you got Kerryon Johnson reaches the ball over the goal line, fumbles by an inch. Chiefs pick the ball up, run it all the way back for a touchdown. On a previous drive, Matthew Stafford throws a touchdown pass to Galloway, and he basically caught it, but bobbled it ever so slightly. The refs ruled it wasn't a touchdown, so that came off the board. And then the very next play, Stafford fumbled, and the Chiefs picked it up. So 2 touchdowns taken off the board right there, and then 1 returned for a touchdown. So 21-point swing in those 2 plays. So just really went against the Lions. And that was kind of the story of their whole season. Just so many things just went against them. They lost games that they definitely should have won. There was another fluky game versus the Packers that they definitely should have won. I was looking at last season's schedule, and it could have been that the Lions, if things actually broke their way instead of breaking against them, could have been 6-1, leading into essentially Matthew Stafford's injury, which then knocked him out for the remaining second half of the season. And then it was just a clean sweep of losses ever since. The Lions actually finished 3-13, which I was actually, or 3-12-1. And I was very surprised by that because I actually thought they did perform better than that. But a 3-12-1 team, a lot of sharp bettors, quite high on them. Some people predicting them to win the division. And I think you might hear that from Zach and Corey as well. Let's hear your guys' thoughts.
Yeah, so a quick run over the Lions odds in the market. Their over-under wins for the year is 7. And one thing I noticed right away is that their over-under for wins is less than the Bears, but their divisional NFC and Super Bowl odds are better than the Bears. So in that, there's just a lot of variance potential in the Lions' record this year. You could think they could be the same quote-unquote crappy Lions as years in past, or they could end up winning and getting to the playoffs and doing some damage. Whereas the Bears, we kind of know probably what we're getting. But divisional odds, we're looking at plus 455. NFC odds, we're looking at 30-1. And Super Bowl odds, we're looking at 65-1.
I definitely do lean over 7.
Yeah, I definitely do as well. I'm a big fan of Stafford. I think if he was healthy all of last year, they could have obviously they would have had a much better record than having Driscoll and Blau at quarterback. You're not going to win many games with those guys in. And I like the weapons they have around Stafford and Galladay, Amendola, Marvin Jones, and Hawkinson. I think those guys really stretch the field and really play to Stafford's strength. They also added DeAndre Swift out of Georgia to complement Kerryon Johnson. I know he struggled to stay healthy, so I think that's good to have another guy there that can take the load. The play calling in the second half, I know, was a big issue for them last year. They tried to sit on leads and run on, I think it was something like 60% of the time on first downs in the third quarter. And just doing that, they just didn't set themselves up well for second and third down. So I think the play calling needs to take an improvement this year if they're really going to turn a corner. But I think they focused where they needed to in the offseason. They focused on their defense, adding Okudah, 3rd overall in the draft, along with Collins, Williams, Harmon, Shelton, and Truvant through free agency and trades. And if Trufant and Coleman can bounce back in that secondary and play how they did in 2018, I think the secondary could look very improved. So I think they made the right moves in the offseason. I worry a little too much. I worry some about Patricia. I don't think he's the greatest coach. He's slowly grabbing kind of as many Patriots as he can, which it kind of gives me a weird feeling. He's picked up Shelton, Flowers, Harmon, and Collins, all from the Patriots. I'm just not sure if the locker room's totally behind him, and he's just making some interesting moves, but I like what the roster has going if they can bring it together.
Yeah, I think it's generous to say that Patricia is not the greatest coach, because he might be actually the worst coach in the NFL. I think we saw it numerous times. One of the reasons why I feel like Lions blew some of the games that they did was directly attributable to Patricia's decision-making.
Yeah, and if we look at the Patriots coaching tree, most of them struggle, except for when we get to another podcast, the Titans' Mike Vrabel, who actually wasn't a part of the coaching staff really, he was a player. But anyone who's part of the Belichick coaching tree tends to not fare very well in the NFL. And I think we've seen the last 2 years, Matt Patricia struggles mightily unifying his team and making game time decisions. I think kind of like a John Gruden type is he might actually be very good at schematics and calling it, a game for like a defense, let's say, or John Gruden for an offense. But as a head coach, as someone who's the heartbeat of a team, he's had a lot of dissension, a lot of people turned off in his own locker room. I think Darius Slay was thrilled to get out of there. So that's the biggest caveat with this team if the whole market's going to buy into this year is, will Patricia kind of screw it up? I think one thing that might be a little controversial, but Stafford might just be the best quarterback in this division now, with Aaron Rodgers kind of going by the wayside through old age and whatnot. So something to consider between the two is, who do you buy more? Patricia being a not very good coach, or Matthew Stafford being an excellent QB if he's healthy? Mm-hmm. And that to me is kind of what you have to bounce off each other.
Yeah, I think if this team can stay healthy, maybe they can win this division. I mean, we've seen bad coaches excel with good teams. Bill O'Brien has brought the Texans to the playoffs numerous times. We saw Doug Marrone bring the Jags to the AFC Championship. So it happens from time to time. But I look at this roster and I am really impressed. I mean, the compliments of DeAndre Swift and Kerryon Johnson, I think, is great. Kenny Galladay might be one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Kind of a little bit underrated. And then Marvin Jones, a great compliment. And I think TJ Hawkinson, who missed a lot of games, missed the rest of the season after Thanksgiving, has a very high ceiling. He's basically a fourth wide receiver for this team. And then on defense, Trey Flowers, Jamie Collins, that Patriots combo. I think Desmond Trufant is a great replacement for Darius Slay. Darius Slay brought a bunch of negative energy. He wanted to get off the team, so it's good to have him out. I think it's really going to come down to how effective is Jeff Okudah, the rookie cornerback, going to play. But even if he struggles, Justin Coleman, I think, is one of the best backup cornerbacks in the league. He had a great game versus the Chiefs. And so I think there's just a lot of talent on this team. It really depends on, can Matt Patricia really collectively get the best out of them? And can, of course, Matthew Stafford stay healthy? It always is going to come down to Stafford. It seems like it's a narrative that we hear, though, just time in and time out, just year in, year out, is Stafford, struggling to stay healthy. So it sounds like, we're all leaning towards the over. Does that sound about right?
Yep.
Or winning the division, yeah.
And winning the division.
Yeah, I also think that plus 455 on the division looks awful juicy, especially just because all four teams in this division, you maybe would cap one of them, if even, at 10 wins this season. I don't think we're really going to see a team break out too far from that in this division. So it's a very winnable division. So if you're getting the Lions at 4 or 5-1, when it's really a tight race, I think there's a lot of value to be had there.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you. I think I'd probably lean that way as well, especially since we're not really betting totals per se. I think that the Lions winning the North does look quite attractive. So let's move on to the final team in the NFC North, the Green Bay Packers, the team that actually won the division last year, went 13-3, went all the way to the NFC Championship game, and then got their faces ripped off for the second time by the Niners. What's some of the pricing on the Packers, Corey?
Yeah, the Packers over-under is actually the same as the Vikings. It's at 9, but it's shaded to the under. Their divisional odds are plus 191, NFC conference odds at 19-1, and Super Bowl odds at 40-1.
So I think that, it's really going to come down to Aaron Rodgers. It's been well documented that it looks like he's, on the downside of his career. The team continues to not provide him with adequate resources at receiver, still has, an average offensive line, lost Brian Beluga, who has been a stalwart on that offensive line. The defense is okay. It played really well last year. Not in love with the coach. So I'm really iffy on the Packers. I would say they're probably at least the second best team, neck and neck with the Lions, I would say. But yeah, I don't feel strongly at least at this point in time in the season. How do you feel, Zach?
Well, and to that point, the Smith brothers, though I don't think they're related, Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith, both had kind of you could either call it a career year or a coming out party, but they both played so well. It very likely was a ceiling. So you're probably not going to get that again. And, their whole linebacking core got exposed against the Niners. I mean, Mostert had 240 yards rushing or something. And they didn't change much on the defensive front to kind of shore that up other than just change the coaching. So that's a little concerning because if they run into a team that can really control the line of scrimmage with good running backs, I don't see how this team improves that aspect of their team. Offensively, though I think Stafford overall, if I had to take a quarterback right now, I would take Stafford. I do think the first half of this year, let's start with, Aaron Rodgers might have a really strong performance because they drafted a QB in the first, I believe it was first round, and he is an emotional player, and that's where ultimately his competitive nature comes out, is when he's being threatened or challenged or you're not good enough, you can't do it, that mentality. So there's a lot for him to kind of prove just for his own kind of ego. So you might get a really strong Aaron Rodgers performance for the first half of the season. But I think as the season kind of tails off, they lose a few more games, he realizes he doesn't have weapons, he might kind of go back to where he was towards last year, the end of last year. So I think you'll have a strong Aaron Rodgers performance beginning of the year, but it'll fade down the stretch. And I don't think that defense is going to be as good as it was last year. And the numbers, I believe, I don't know if someone can back me up on this, their 13 wins last year had a similar statistical performance when they had 6 wins versus when they went to the Super Bowl. So last year's 13 wins was an anomaly based on their statistical performance. So, they should have been, a 10-win team, and they had 13 wins. So they looked better than their record was better than they actually were last year.
Yes, of course.
So,
yeah.
And they didn't improve in the offseason.
Yeah,
just like how you
I
said
like
about
the angle.
Vikings.
I definitely like the angle of Aaron Rodgers, very emotional dude, could really come out and try to demonstrate he's still clearly the best quarterback, franchise quarterback, and the team should invest in him, and really wants to put an exclamation point on that. So I definitely do like that angle. What do you think, Corey?
Yeah, I think the Packers were very fraudulent last year as well. They were 8-1 in one-score games, and I think there's maybe some writing on the wall with them drafting Love. You would think that a team that just went 13-3, or maybe possibly a few pieces away from winning it all, wouldn't draft a backup quarterback at that time. But I think they were acknowledging that as close as their record and play maybe indicated, that they maybe weren't as close as people think they maybe were, and they probably see that internally. So I think this defense, although it looked great last year, they faced exceptionally easy quarterbacks. They saw Trubisky twice, Moore, Jones, Flacco, Carr, Haskins, Blau, and Glennon. And this year they're just going to see a big jump in that as well. So that defense that did exceed expectations last year, I'll be more interested to see how they play this year. So I'm definitely looking for a regression in the Packers this year as well.
Yeah, I'll lean under 9 wins. How about you, Zach?
Oh yeah, that feels too high.
3 for 3.
Cool. All right, great pod, guys. That wraps up the NFC North. We'll see you on the next one, and that's the closing bell.